Hey guys, this is Lime, and welcome back to another Minecraft Feed the Beast tutorial. This episode, we're going to be talking about power sources and how to get started with them in Feed the Beast. The three primary power types in Feed the Beast are going to be Redstone Flux, or RF, Minecraft Joules, or MJ, or Energy Units, or EU. All three of these power sources are useful and can be used to power your base, but I would highly recommend avoiding Minecraft Joules. This used to be the primary power source of mods like Buildcraft and Forestry. Now it really only services Buildcraft, and in a lot of packs, you're going to find that Buildcraft's power source has been converted over to RF. Since it has such low usability and is really hard to generate, I'd highly recommend just avoiding it altogether. RF is going to be the primary power source for the vast majority of mods, including everything from the Thermal Expansion Suite, all of Ender.io, and many other mods. It is probably the primary power source that you should use for your base, as you can use it from any sort of machines, from the most basic to the most advanced. EU, or Energy Units, is used for Industrial Craft and all of its associated mods. It's pretty solid because Industrial Craft itself has machines from the low end up to the high end, but it's not really very useful outside of Industrial Craft. In some mod packs, there are ways to convert between RF and EU. It's not always present, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. So I'd recommend just using the power source for the mod packs you're going to use. If you're looking at using a lot of the Industrial Craft mods, definitely you start generating power in EU. But if you're looking at most of the other mods, I'd highly recommend just starting with RF and going from there. To start off with, we'll go over how you make EU power, because there's not really a ton of ways to do it because it's limited to just the Industrial Craft suite and its associated mods. The primary way you're going to start generating power in EU is going to be with a generator from Industrial Craft 2. This is pretty simple. It operates exactly the same as a furnace does. You could put any sort of burnable material like coal in here. That'll be your primary power source starting off. And for your power system, you're going to hook this up to a bat box. A bat box is really easy to make and really easy to use. Basically, any side of the bat box will accept power from an adjacent generator or power source or adjacent cabling. There is one output on the bat box, which if you build a wrench from Industrial Craft, which can be made just with a bunch of bronze ingots, you can then change the side that the power source, the power output is on by just right-clicking. You'll see that dot there is the power output. Any machines placed beside this will get power from the bat box, which can store up to 40,000 EU, and it has a maximum output of 32 EU per tick, so any machines that use up to that can be fed off of it. It can also charge any Industrial Craft equipment by being placed inside of it. You can output it from here into a cable, and then any machines touching the cables will get power, and that's the primary way you're gonna set yourself up beginning here. The crafting recipe for the generator is very simple. You just need an iron furnace, which is just an upgraded version of a furnace with iron plates, which can be made with at least in Feed the Beast Infinity here, made with an engineer's hammer. So basically just mostly iron is what you're going to need. The crafting recipes will vary based on the mod pack, but it will generally be quite simple, and with the addition of NEI, it should be pretty easy to find the recipes for that. And then with the iron furnace, you just need more iron plates and an RE battery, which is made with tin, some insulated tin cable, and redstone. Insulated tin cable is going to require obviously some tin for the cabling, and rubber, which can be found either through Industrial Craft or through a couple other mods, but it's not that hard to make. Once you have your generator, you're going to want to make your bat box. Bat boxes, again, not that hard. You just need some wood planks. These can be any color of wood planks, more RE batteries, and more insulated tin cables. This way, if you end up, you can, admittedly, just put your generator directly beside any of the machines you're powering, and that will power them, but it won't store any energy, so anything that gets, it won't store any energy past a certain point. So if you end up generating too much, you'll be wasting it, and you'll be wasting fuel. So it's definitely recommended to have a bat box. Then with your cabling, again, insulated copper cabling is very simple to make. Just some rubber and cabling. You just need cutters and copper plates to get 2 cables. You can use uninsulated cabling, but if you touch it, you will be electrocuted, so you can't get close to it. Whereas if you have it insulated, you'll be a lot safer. So I definitely recommend insulating it. There are 2 other fairly easy sources of power from Industrial Craft, one of them being windmills. For some reason in Feed the Beast Infinity Evolved, the windmill recipe does not get shown when you click on it, but you can check out the Industrial Craft wiki or Feed the Beast wiki to get the crafting recipe for that. It's fairly simple. Windmills are pretty simple. You place them down either on a wire connected to a bat box or just directly on the bat box. And based on the wind, as you'll see here, it's generating a tiny bit of power. Also makes quite a racket. But they will generate power just based off the wind. It's intermittent though. It all depends on how much wind's going on in the area. The higher up, based on the block level they are placed, the more power they will generate. But they are infinite power. They don't require any fuel. For those, you will definitely want a bat box, as they don't generate power on demand like a generator does. As you can see here, the generator can output up to 10 EUs per tick. One windmill will output anywhere between 0 to 5, so I think the generator is still a much better power source for early on. In the same vein as the windmill, you will have the watermill. Again, recipe's not available in NEI in Feed the Beast Infinity Evolved, but it's a pretty simple system. You just place a watermill down, up to cables into a bat box, or right beside the bat box, and you need to have water on any side of it, a water source block specifically. The more sides you have, the more power it will generate. As you can see here, we have one side, that will generate 1 EU per tick of output. If I grab my wrench here, and we change this, you will see that the buffer here will start draining, and it will start filling up our bat box with 1 EU per tick. Or now actually its output is dropped down. Either way, it doesn't output too much power. So again, I still highly recommend for EU that you go with the generator. Now, if you're looking at RF power, there's a lot more options of how we can generate it and how we can store it due to the fact that there's so many mods that are associated with it. My preference would be the thermal expansion Dynamos. They're really easy to operate, really easy to craft, and they generate a lot of power. But there are other options. If you have Buildcraft installed, in Feed the Beast Infinity Evolved, Buildcraft has been converted to use RF, so there's no megajoules or microjoules being used here at all. The simplest way for the Buildcraft side of things is to use a redstone engine. You just power it with a redstone signal, and it will start generating RF. It generates at an incredibly slow... Apparently, it does not want to operate right now. It generates at an oh, there we go. It generates at an incredibly slow rate, like less than an RF per second. It's really not a very valuable, very viable power source. I would highly recommend not using these whatsoever. They're more of a waste of your time, but they are infinite. They don't ever require any fuel. There is also the Stirling engine from Buildcraft. It just requires any sort of burnable fuels. You're looking mostly at coal and charcoal, but it'll operate the same as a furnace in that sense, without with the exception of lava, I believe. And again, you just need to have fuel and a redstone signal, and it will generate. If you have Ender.io, there is the Stirling generator from Ender.io. Again, operates very much the same as any sort of furnace. You would put in a burnable material, and it will produce RF power. There's also a Clockwork engine from Forestry. It is a pretty bizarre engine, which requires you to keep hitting it by holding right-click on it, and it will start generating power. You just keep winding it up by holding right-click, and then you release it, and it'll start going. It generates a decent amount of power and is fairly useful considering that it's infinite, but it's not exactly the greatest source of power ever, as it requires you to be sitting in front of it, winding it up at all times. I would highly recommend not using it. Equally in Forestry, there's the peat-fired engine. The peat-fired engine just requires you to put peat in it, and then obviously turn it on with a redstone signal. It'll produce ash as in a byproduct, and it produces a fairly large amount of power in the end, but it does take a very long time. Its production rate, and that is how much RF per tick it makes, is quite low. So if you're powering a lot of machines, you're going to need quite a few. But for a long-term power setup with power storage, it works decently well. But you do need a system for creating peat, which can be kind of difficult early on in the game, and takes a bit more effort to automate. We have extra utilities options here. The two basic setups for extra utilities are going to be a furnace generator. As it says, it just operates like a furnace. You put in the burnable materials and it will output power, and a fairly good amount of power at that. At the same time, there's the lava generator. Lava generator just requires an input of lava. This can be sent in through pipes or can be used with buckets. Again, it's fairly easy to get lava. You'll get 40,000 RF for every bucket of lava. Now, my personal preference of all these is still the thermal expansion Dynamos, and they work fairly easily. There's the steam dynamo. The steam dynamo is a little more complex than some of the other machines. It requires you to have water in it. This can be put in through a water bucket, or I'll show you a better way of doing that in a second. and then it requires any sort of burnable material. Coal or charcoal is probably the best to use, and it produces quite a lot of power. As you can see here, we get 38,000 RF. This is for 16 coal. I tested all of these with 16 coal, so as we can see here, we've got 380,000 RF in the steam dynamo, and at a really fast rate of about, I believe, 40 RF a tick. It's either 40 or 80. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head here, but it's quite a powerful setup for a single block. In comparison, the Stirling engine with 16 coal in it only generated 127,000. The Stirling generator from Ender.io only 128,000. But if I'm not mistaken, yeah, only 32,000 out of the furnace generator. So power efficiency wise, the best bet is definitely going to be going with the steam dynamo. It does require the water inputs. It's a little more complex, but this is really easy to get, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. I mean, obviously you can just use buckets and an infinite water source, and you can put it in here, but that's obviously not as pleasant as having an automated system for that. But definitely my favorite option for coal or wood-based power source. If you're going for lava, the magmatic dynamo is pretty simple. All it takes is lava input, again, like the lava generator from Extra Utilities. That lava can be piped in or it can be put in through buckets, and it generates 180,000 RF per bucket of lava, which is significantly better than the 40,000 we get out of the lava generator. So I'd recommend just going with thermal expansion. Thermal expansion is the core of the RF power system, generally speaking. So I would think that in most mod packs you're going to have thermal expansion, and it's really simple to use, really good if you get comfortable with it, and I would highly recommend going with power from thermal expansion. For the steam dynamo, what you're probably going to want to do is get an aqueous accumulator, which is a fairly simple block to make, as can be seen here. You're going to need copper gears, glass, buckets. This can be any type of glass, mind you. Copper gears are really simple. It's just one piece of iron, 4 copper, really inexpensive. A pneumatic servo, glass, iron, and redstone, really easy to get after your first mining trip. And a machine frame. If you can see here, sorry, it's a little hard to see. You can see any machine frame can be used here. It's cycling through them, but we're obviously going to use a basic machine frame because it is the cheapest. All it takes is some glass, iron, and a tin gear, which is just stone, cobblestone, wood, and some tin. It's really inexpensive to make an aqueous accumulator. An aqueous accumulator can be placed. I would recommend placing it down a level from whatever you're doing, because what you're going to do is you're going to use some water, and if you have a water source block beside it, it will start sucking it up. And then all you need is any sort of piping. This can be Buildcraft piping, this can be Ender.io piping, or what I would recommend due to its ease of use is fluid ducts from thermodynamics. They're really inexpensive depending on which one you choose. Here we're just going to use a temperate fluid duct. Is the cheapest. It is just copper and glass, really inexpensive, and all you have to do is just connect it, and it should. So for the aqueous accumulator, the big thing to remember is that the more sides you have water on, the faster and more water will come out of the aqueous accumulator. All you have to do is take your temperate fluid ducts, connect them to the top, and connect them up to your dynamo, and it will start filling it up. The more dynamos you have running off this, the more water source blocks you want touching this. You can also put one underneath for a maximum of 5. I'm sorry about that, guys. The aqueous accumulator is being a little weird. You need to make sure you have water on, at least in this version, in Feed the Beast Infinity Evolved. You need to make sure you have water on as many sides as possible here for it to suck it up, but it'll just push it right directly into the piping and then straight into your steam dynamo. Multiple steam dynamos can be connected to the same aqueous accumulator, so if you want to increase the size of your array, you can do that without having to add more aqueous accumulators. So it's really not that hard to build these, and that'll give it infinite water and make sure that your steam dynamo has constant and continuous source of water. At that point, all you have to do is just add some coal, charcoal, or whatever to your dynamo, and it'll just keep running without you having to do anything about it. And these dynamos are really cheap to make. Just copper, redstone, and some silver. Super easy to do. The magmatic dynamo, as I mentioned, all it requires is lava, and it produces a much better efficiency than any of the other lava sources here, and it outputs at a really high rate. To make a magmatic dynamo, it is slightly more expensive, and I would still recommend going with a steam dynamo off the start, because it's generally, with the exclusion of being near a pool of lava, it's generally fairly hard to get a reliable source of lava early on, and one that you don't have to just keep going with a bucket and refilling it. It's hard to build an automated setup. Once you gain access to the nether, though, it might be worth upgrading to a magmatic dynamo. But at the start, I would recommend steam. For the magmatic one, you're going to need invar, and quite a bit of it. And invar is a more complex material that needs to be crafted from invar blend. Invar blend is going to require you to have some form of pulverizing capability, generally speaking, which is going to require power. There is exceptions to this. If you do have Tinker's Construct in your mod pack, which many of them do, you will be able to, in the smeltery, do alloying of metals, so you can make it in a smeltery without having to have access to power. But that's kind of a pain and not often worth it for the early game. Definitely an upgrade option though. And then for RF, if you're looking at power storage, my recommendations of power storage are either going to be from thermal expansion again, with a leadstone energy cell. There's further upgraded energy cells. The leadstone's the lowest tier. As you'll see here, it can store up to 400,000 RF with a max input and output of 200 RF a tick. So you can hook up a couple of these dynamos to it, and multiple machines on the output side. Now, to make it, you're going to need copper, conductive coil, which can require electrum. Electrum is slightly difficult to get. It's the same thing as invar. It's an alloy, which means you're either going to need to have crushing / macerating capabilities, depending on what mod pack you're looking at, or again, you can use Tinker's Construct to alloy and make electrum. But my recommendation for this is to quite simply build your first machine and sit it directly beside your steam dynamo. And that first machine is going to be a pulverizer from thermal expansion. They're relatively easy to craft. This one's got a basic machine frame again, which is not that hard to get. Copper gears, flint, a piston, so a bit of iron, redstone, wood, cobble, and then some gold and redstone. Again, if you've done a good mining trip, you should have all the materials to make a pulverizer. You can sit it directly beside your dynamo. That'll give it enough power, and that'll allow you to make the constituent dusts that are required to make the electrum. As you can see here, electrum grit or electrum blend, depending on which mod pack it is, it'll change the name. It's just silver and gold dust. So if you put a piece of silver ore, a piece of gold ore into your pulverizer, you'll get it, and you'll be able to smelt that up in a normal furnace, and that'll give you the ability to make one of these things. And so they're very easy to make. They're a little bit annoying to do that, but overall pretty easy. The other option I would recommend is a basic capacitor bank from Ender.io. It's a million RF, so quite a lot of storage, and all it really takes is a block of redstone, a bunch of iron in the form of these basic capacitors, which require copper, redstone, and some gold nuggets. Really easy to make, and they operate pretty much the same way. They can be placed directly beside the dynamos to get power into them. The capacitor bank, though, the big benefit of it is you can connect multiple ones beside each other, and as you'll see up there, their RF capacity all combines into one, which is a good benefit of them. The energy cells, though, have a massive bonus in that you can pick up an energy cell by using a crescent hammer from thermal expansion, and you can just right-click on them, shift right-click on them, and you can just pick it up with all of its power still stored inside. So if you're moving bases and stuff, very good option to use for that. And for the outputs on these, you'll see once you open it up, you'll see the power storage. You can limit or increase the input and output. And over here on the right side, when you open up the configuration tab, you'll see blue dots in the corners. That means this is an input. You can just left-click it, and change it to the gold dots or the copper-ish looking dots. The gold is going to be your outputs, and that'll change the side that's relative to it. So you can change any of the sides to that. And that's your best power storage options for RF power. Next, I guess we'll go into transmission of this power. Like we have cabling over here. With thermal expansion, or not thermal expansion, with RF, there's multiple sources or multiple ways you can transmit power. Most of the mods that use it have their own power transmission methods. There's cabling for most of them. I would highly recommend, again, just for ease of use, going with the thermal dynamics stuff, which is part of the thermal expansion suite. And the cheapest option there is going to be a leadstone flux duct. It's super easy to make. 6 redstone, piece of glass, and 2 lead ingots, and you get 6 for it. It's super inexpensive and super easy to make, and super easy to use. And you have a maximum transfer rate of 200 RF a tick. Now, at 200 RF a tick, that is the maximum output and input of your leadstone energy cell, so you don't need any more cables than one single line. And all you have to do is, if you want to connect more dynamos up to it, you can just have this coming off your input, and you can just connect more dynamos onto that, and they'll flow into it. And if you have machines that you want to come off of this, like your pulverizer or any other machines, you just configure an output, like we showed you, and then just connect them off. Oops, sorry, my bad. The output is the copper-looking one, and there it automatically connects. Super easy to use. Later on, when you upgrade your energy cell and stuff, you can upgrade to other methods of transmission from thermodynamics, which will increase your transfer rates, as you can see here, by a significant amount. Anyways, that'll be all for now. Thank you guys for watching. This should get you a good start on your power setup and get you going. One more thing I forgot to mention is when it comes to the thermal expansion dynamos, the direction of output, the direction where the power comes out, is going to be wherever the thin side is pointing. If you put down flux ducts or a energy cell and then place a dynamo beside it, it will automatically face into these parts. If you want to rotate it, all you have to do is just right click it with a crescent hammer, as long as there is something that can accept power beside it, and it will swap directions between them. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I've been Lime, and this is the basic power tutorial for Feed the Beast. This should apply to any of the Feed the Beast packs or any other mod packs that contain these mods. These are fairly common mods all, so you should see them in most places. Again, crafting recipes and the values they produce in terms of energy production might vary mod pack to mod pack, but as a whole, this should mostly apply to pretty much every mod pack. So once again, thank you all for watching, and have a great day.